Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Cards and Coffee. And on today's episode, we're going to be digging into one of the most popular things in the game right now. Master Duel has been out for a little over a week now, and everybody and their mom has been hopping online, crafting cards, building their favorite decks, and really, it's for a good reason. Now, if it's your first time here, welcome. My name's Justin. I play this game pretty competitively. I have multiple tops over multiple formats, and the point of this channel really is to share whatever knowledge I might have with you, whether you're a beginner or somebody who's really trying to get more competitive, or maybe you guys just want to know what's trending and what's going on in the format right now. So if that's something you're into, please consider subscribing to the channel. We already have over 1,000 subscribers, and we've only been at this for a few months now. So shout out to everybody who's already subscribed, and if you want to join the squad, of course, you're always welcome. There is so much to talk about on Master Duel. I really don't think I could fit it all in one episode, so I decided to kind of split it up into groups, and on this episode, I just wanted to touch on what I think the best way to go about spending your gems are, and of course, if you're on a budget, maybe some options and choices that might suit your needs. We'll talk about what you might see on the ladder, what decks are pretty successful right now, and what you as a player can do about it. But first, as always, guys, please go grab yourself a cup of coffee or something. That way you guys can sit down and tune in. Thanks, guys. So, starting things off, I think we should talk about what decks you might run into on the ladder. There are so many decks that really can have a lot of success in this format, especially because it's a best of one, and it really creates an environment where there's a lot of decks that would just auto-lose game 2 and 3 because the side deck would just punish them. But now that it's just a one of, well, there's a lot more room for decks to succeed. Now, I'm not balling or anything, so I don't have access to every deck and every card, but I at least have a good amount that we can show you, and we can just, of course, just pull up any card that is on here, and we'll talk about the decks. Now, these decks aren't in any particular order, and there's a bunch more that I probably could have just put on this list anyway, but in a nutshell, I really feel like either of these would be something that you'd run into on the ladder, or might even be a good choice for you to play. For any of you who play in the TCG right now, you know that Lyralist Tri-Brigade is one of the best decks of the format, and while it is very good right now in the TCG, it hasn't really seen a lot of success in the OCG, and even right now, the deck has a lot of success in Master Duel, but I don't know if it's really the best deck of the format. There are so many different cards in this format that the TCG just doesn't have, and one thing that has always kept this deck down in the OCG is the presence of Max C. We'll talk about that when we get into some of the staples because, well, when it comes to picking a deck, if you're trying to stay budget, when it comes to staples, I think you really have to be selective on what you can use your URCP on. Crafting cards is technically an unlimited resource, but when you're working with a budget and you're not trying to put money into the game, you're really reliant on the cards you pull in your packs. That way you can use them to dismantle and craft whatever cards you're missing. We'll talk about that more later, but just know staples like hand traps or board breakers are something that you really have to consider when trying to build a deck. Now, when you hop over to the Lyralist stuff, for the most part, it's low rarity until you look at the two main extra deck monsters being ultra rare. Starling by itself is a 2 or a 3 of, so that could get a little expensive. And not only that, you typically will mix it with the Tri-Brigade archetype, so the main deck cards are pretty low rarity, but again, when you get to the extra deck cards, the ultra rares can definitely add up. Now again, maybe you get lucky, you pull some of these ultras in your packs, and that's the deck you want to go with, but if you're just starting from a blank canvas, this could be a deck that's hard to build. Like I mentioned earlier, Max C is an amazing hand trap right now, and it probably always will, at least in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! So in a format that is very dominated by it, you either have to build your deck around it, or at least be able to counter it. Lyralist is definitely a deck that plays into Max C pretty hard, so unless you're willing to tech your deck out with crossouts and called bides and ashes, which are all ultra rare, then really you're asking to get Max C'd. I guess you could also play Gamma, but you know, a smart player will wait till you have a monster on board. Speaking of the Tri-Brigades, there's a bunch of different ways you can play it. I actually think this is one of the best decks of the format, if you skip out on the Lyralist stuff, it becomes a lot more affordable. Like I mentioned, most of the main deck engine is all rare and lower, outside of some staples that you'll have to get that are super rare, and of course the usual ultra rares, which we'll talk about later. As a core, this deck is relatively budget. As far as the extra deck goes, the only mandatory ultra rare you're gonna need is Shurig, but again, you can kind of pick and choose what route you want to go. Not only do people combine it with Lyralisk, but some people play it pure, or even combined it with Zodiacs. Zodiacs is personally one of my favorite decks of all time. I have so many tops with the deck. It's hard for me to not love it. And on top of that, this deck is actually really cheap to play. When you look at the engine, the only ultra rare really is Trident, and Tankies are super, so those are really easy to craft. Outside of that, the only in-engine super is Thoroughblade, and again, if you're playing it as a splashable engine, you're playing a small package anyway, whereas if you're playing Pure, which actually is a really budget deck, then the only other ultras you'll need outside of the staples is maybe a Zeus. But outside of that, you can really fill the deck out with a bunch of budget hand traps and board breakers, and even cards like Torrential Tribute. So Zodiac actually is personally one of my favorite budget decks in this game right now, but just know this is actually a deck you could definitely run into on the ladder. Another deck that's actually really budget is the Eldritch archetype. You can splash this in with Zoo, you could play it pure with a bunch of floodgates, and it really counters a lot of what you'll run into the ladder right now. Golden Lord is the only ultra rare, except for maybe some staples that you want to play, or maybe some extra cards that you're going to tech, but again, those aren't needed to play the deck, they're just something you add on top. You could get away with playing one Golden Lord, but I strongly suggest at least getting the two, because after that, really the only engine stuff that is higher rarity is Cursed Eldlands and Sanguines as super. Everything else is rare, so super easy to craft, and even easier to pull if you open the Eldritch pack. Not only that, like I mentioned, you could be playing a bunch of floodgates, Goes and Match, Skill Drain, which is at 3 in this format, Vanity's Emptiness, Imperial Order, you name it. There are so many floodgates that will just put your opponent at a screeching halt. This deck is really fun to play. It's going to take longer to finish the games because it doesn't really OTK out of nowhere. But when it comes to a format where there's a bunch of decks that are just trying to skip your turn by putting up this insane first turn board, being able to go set 5 pass after actually makes it to where you could pick that board apart. Virtual World is another really popular deck just because True King of All Calamities is still legal. Even without it, I would argue this deck is still really good. It has its own consistency issues, which it always has, but again, this is another deck that could just skip your opponent's turn if it opens correctly. And it's got a great grind game, and the main deck stuff is all fairly low rarity again. Once you get into the extra deck, this deck really can get a little expensive. And again, you're going to have the hand traps, maybe the board breakers, a bunch of other ultras you might try to fit in. So if your extra deck has a lot of ultras in it, it might be a little harder to craft the other staples you might need. Another really cool deck that's really easy to craft is the Prank Kids archetype. In all actuality, you only need the one Battle Butler as far as ultras go. There are some other staples you might want, like Access Code and maybe even Unicorn for the extra deck. But outside of that, the entire main deck core is all super low rarity, super easy to craft, and whether or not you have those other staples in your extra deck, this deck can function perfectly fine, get you out on the ladder, getting some wins, and getting more and more gems to help you open packs. That way you can get more CP after you dismantle to get all the staples you might need. Totally Awesome is another ultra rare this deck can play, and it's a really cool follow-up play that the deck does after turn 1. Again, you don't need it, but it's just an amazing thing this deck can do. The deck revolves around 1-card starters, and really you can tech the deck out with 20 cards that really are meant to stop whatever you think you might run into on the ladder. I love decks like this in the game because it makes it to where you can jump straight into the game, start playing at a competitive level, getting more and more gems as you climb the ladder, and slowly start unlocking all these hand traps and staples you might need that you're going to use in pretty much any deck you play. Another deck that's pretty easy to build is Sky Striker. Again, it's kind of in the middle where there's a lot of staples that are ultra that this deck needs, but as far as the engine goes, it's all pretty low rarity outside of the 1 Kagari and the 2 Engage you need. Outside of that, you have a few supers and a bunch of rare and lowers you'll want to get. And again, if you get the secret pack for this, then hopefully you can just open most of this stuff after opening 10 or 20 packs. Sky Striker is definitely a fan favorite of this game, so don't be surprised if you run into it in the latter, because honestly, it's a really great deck right now that's also an extremely toolbox deck. There's also Dragon Link, which can be very expensive because there's so many different cards you need. Also, any Grass is Greener deck can get pretty expensive because now you're playing a 60-card deck, and obviously the more cards you play, the more cards you have to unlock. So, pretty obvious why that gets so expensive. And arguably one of the best decks of the format right now is Drytron. This deck struggles with Max C, but there's a lot of ways it can play around it. I think this deck would be really weak if we were doing a best of 3 with side deck, but really, this deck is really insane, so putting up a board that basically will skip your opponent's turn is always going to be good in most formats anyway. As far as the main deck goes, it's actually pretty budget for the most part, outside of staples, but honestly, the extra deck is just full of ultra rares, so this could be a little hard to complete. But if you have the time and the resources and the commitment to just focus on building this deck, then you definitely could get it. Now, really briefly, I wanted to just show you some of the staples that a lot of people are trying to get their hands on. Like I mentioned, Max C and Ash Blossom, just two amazing hand traps in the format right now. Max C letting you draw every time your opponent special summons. Ash Blossom just being a generic hand trap that just stops so many effects, including Max C, makes for two of the most ideal hand traps you want to craft pretty much as soon as you can. And after that, you can look into getting stuff like Nibiru, maybe Droplets or Imperm. But again, you start doing all the math, and those are about 2 to 3 of each of them, and that's a lot of ultra rare CP. So again, these cards can be played in most decks, and most likely you will if you can. So when you're trying to pick your first deck, you want to make sure you pick one that doesn't have so many in-engine ultra rares, so that way when it comes to crafting a deck, you don't waste all your CP on the in-archetype ultra rares and leave yourself without any of these staples for your main deck. There's also a way you can kind of strategically pick what packs you want when it comes to drafting. The secret packs definitely help you get a deck, especially if it's all in one pack. And I'll kind of give you guys an example after this of what I would do if I were trying to get a certain archetype. But just know, all this stuff, including these extra deck cards like Access Code, Appaloosa, the Nightmares, they're all ultra rare and they all add up. So take it from me, when you're starting this game, I think the best approach is to go the budget route, manage your CP, and as you grind through the game and you start generating more packs and more CP after dismantling, then of course, then you can start going back, getting your hand traps, and even start opening packs for the archetypes you actually want. Like I mentioned, there's a bunch of really budget tech cards you can play in your decks, even without all these ultra rares, and I'll definitely show you some of the ones that are my personal favorites. But first, I wanted to hop over to the shop and kind of show you what I would do if I was trying to get a specific archetype. Okay, so I have about 3,000 gems, so that's about 30 packs that I can open. I'm actually hoping to get some of the Dogmatica core out of this pack, and what I have in front of me is the Echo Chamber Nation pack. The reason why I want to open this today is because I only have one Shurig for my Tri-Brigade engine, but not only that, I only have one Ecclesia for the Dogmaticas. So when I go to the featured cards and I look at exactly what I have, you can see the one Shurig. I got most of the Tri-Brigade stuff outside of that, but when you look at the Dogmaticas, I obviously only have the Ecclesia. Fleur-de-Lis and Servant are both Ultras, so we're really hoping to get lucky and open one of these, but even if we hit any of the other Ultra Rares that is or isn't in this pack, it all goes towards this anyway because I can just use that material to craft whatever deck I'm trying to craft. Not only that, but there's a bunch of super rares in this that I would love to get. More Ecclesia, Maximus, and even more Fairjet or Bearbroom would be nice. So really, this pack has a lot that it offers for me personally, and when you're trying to build a deck or looking for specific cards, this is something you kind of want to consider when opening packs. So we'll go ahead and open packs. Obviously, if we get really lucky and hit everything we need, then we'll just move on to the next pack. But really, even if we don't hit the cards, we're just hoping to hit supers and ultra rares. That way we can convert that CP and get the cards we're missing. So let's go first 10 packs. Okay, wow, okay, we got 2 ultra rares for sure. Let's open this up and we'll see how it goes. Open it up. Looks like there's nothing here. We got most of that, no problem. Next pack, rip it open. Let's see what happens here. And, oh, one wiggled. Okay, super rare. See, okay, this is a good example because Spriggan's Watch is definitely a card I do not want. But for every 3 super rares I pull, I know I can convert those into any 1 super rare I actually need. So, while I don't want this, it all helps at the end of the day. Next pack, looks like it has nothing here. Following pack after that. Okay, one wiggle. All right, another super rare that we, well, really don't need. But again, one more super rare, and we got pretty much another Ecclesia or even the Maximus we don't have. Next pack. Oh, there's a Sangan. That's pretty cool. Pack after that. Nothing here. And here's the first ultra rare pack, so we'll see how lucky we get. Super rare bird call and ultra rare fleur-de-lis. So this is perfect. We hit an ultra rare that we were looking for. So like I mentioned, even if it was something I didn't need, for every 3 that I get, it will go towards this card. And since we picked a pack that actually has ultra rares that we want, it just increased the odds of actually hitting a card that we'll use without having to craft. Super awesome. And again, there's a bird call that we could also use to make that Maximus we don't have. Now we're really only hoping for Nadir, so we'll see if we get lucky. And again, if not, we'll try to craft it. Okay, another Spriggan's Watch. That for sure is another super that's going to go towards either an Ecclesia or the Maximus. Another pack with nothing, Spriggan's Booty. Here's another rainbow pack. Hopefully it treats us good. Flipping it up, and nothing but... That's so cool. Okay, there's the second Shurig. This is actually looking too easy, so just know it's normally not like this. But again, if both of those ultra rares were cards that I didn't want, then obviously that's 20 CP towards 30 that would go towards any ultra I actually needed. So again, here's everything we pulled. We got 4 supers and 2 ultras. Again, both of them we wanted, so we don't need to dismantle them. All these super rares I'd probably get rid of. Maybe I'd keep the bird call. So now hopping back over to this list, if I were to look at all the stuff I had, again, I'm still missing the Nadir, and I know for sure I can craft the Maximus, so it's kind of one of those things now where I got to reassess and go, let's see what I actually need. Is it worth opening more packs? Specifically, I only need 1 ultra rare and 1 super rare. I could do 10 more and hope to get lucky. And again, with the same approach, if there's supers and ultras we don't need, they could always go towards them. So really, it's not that bad an idea, especially because I could get more Ecclesia. I don't know. Let's go ahead and crack 10 more just because we're here. Maybe we get lucky, get the Nadir, and again, if not, hopefully we at least can hit some ultra rares for our crafting. I'm just going to go ahead and skip these. Let's see what we get. Okay, we got 3 more ultra rares and what? 5 more super rares. This is really awesome. Okay, there's the Maximus. We don't have to craft it. We also got a Mistake, which is a pretty cool staple to hold on to. Fairy Tale Snow is brand new for me, at least. I don't have one of those. Glad I have it now. Here's a second Fleur-de-Lis, so I could put this away to dismantle towards a Nadir. And of course, this guy here, what is this? Supreme King Zark. Yeah, we're definitely never playing this card, so that's definitely an instant craft to go towards my Nadir Servant. Okay, so let's say we're just going to go and build a new deck, something with a Dogmatica engine. The first thing I'm going to do is start dismantling all my extra cards. So first thing, I'll do this. Get all the extra normal, rare, and supers. Then I'll go to dismantle the selected cards, and we'll go from there. So we got 2 Fleur-de-Lis. It's definitely tempting to get rid of one of those. We already have 30 CP up there, but for the sake of this episode, I'm going to pretend I don't have 30. I'm going to go ahead and throw that Zark in there. I'm going to throw the non-shiny Fleur-de-Lis in there as well. And really, it comes down to what you think you weren't going to need. In this case, I kind of want to hold on to most of these. Even Dragon Ravine is kind of tempting to keep. Not only that, but we have all these super rares that we really just don't need. We already have a Maximus, but it'd be cool to have a second one. I can get rid of a bunch of these other cards that are, well, kind of useless right now. There are so many supers that you'll accumulate over this game, and whether or not you play them all, I mean, it's not very likely. So for me, if I see an archetype that I may play in the future, then I typically try to hold on to the card if I can. But if there's a card that I know for sure I will never touch, then yeah, I just throw it to the side and, well, use it for something better. Before I end this, I want to show you guys all the budget tech cards you can add to your deck in the meantime while you're trying to accumulate all these other ultra rares. But before all that, if this video is helpful or if these tips have really shown you some cool ways to get cards you want, or maybe you have some tips of your own, Comment down below, let me know what you guys think. If you think I'm a complete madman, that's totally okay too. Just comment down below and let me know. As long as you subscribe though, that's the catch. So as far as budget goes, it's actually pretty easy to craft most of this. Super rares are kind of a dime a dozen. Okay, maybe not a dime a dozen, but definitely when you're cracking open packs, you'll have a lot of extras that really you don't need. I already have some of these budget staples crafted from earlier, but there's also a bunch more that I might not have on my personal list. So again, if you already know of some that I didn't mention, please comment down below and let everybody else know as well. So as far as hand traps go, stuff like Skullmeister is actually a pretty good hand trap right now, stopping Praying Kids effects, Drytron effects, Shadalls, Eldritch, Virtual World, Tri-Brigade. Almost every deck I've mentioned today actually has an application for this card, minus a couple. So if you haven't already, definitely consider picking this one up, because as you play on the ladder, you're definitely going to run into things this card is good against. Not only that, it's not once per turn like Ash Blossom or something, so you could definitely use multiples if you opened them. There are other hand traps that are good as well, stuff like Gamma, DD Crow, and Drollenlock. Again, no real order on what one's the best, but again, they're all super rare and lower, so definitely easy to craft if you need to. Gamma just really is a powerful card. You just have to play the driver in your deck, which can be a little awkward. Droll is a very great hand trap at stopping all these really crazy combo decks that search a bunch. And DD Crow really, almost like Meister, has a lot of application in the meta right now. Hitting Golden Lord, Drytron names, Virtual World spell and traps, Sky Striker spells, and Ray. There's just so many different things you can use it for. So again, another hand trap that's not once per turn that would be great to add to the deck. There's also a lot of really good extra deck cards you can get as well. Again, it's kind of dependent on what deck you're playing, but keep your eye out for stuff like the Nightmares, like Cerberus and Phoenix. Even your Charmers are good, depending on what attribute your deck is revolved around. So when building, really look at the extra deck as well, because you never know, you might find something that's really good. When you move to the spells, pretty much all the pot cards are super rare, so that's really amazing. I would have been really upset if they were ultra. Konami definitely made it easy to get a hold of some of these essential staples. Pot of Desires, Pot of Extravagance, Pot of Avarice, and even a Pot of Prosperity are all super rare and super easy to get a hold of. Back row removal like Cosmic Cyclone and Twin Twister, again, more staples that are easy to grab. MST, I think, is like normal or rare, and it comes in one of the structure decks too. And going to the traps, like I mentioned, Eldritch is really easy to build as well, because Trap Tricks is super, Ice Dragon's Prison is a super, and of course, Skill Drain is a super as well. So even when you go to tech your deck out, you know it's going to be pretty easy to get a hold of a lot of these power traps as well, no matter what deck you're playing. There are a lot of good spell cards in here, but really the main two that I like are Forbidden Chalice and Book of Moon. Those are some really good cards to help be offensive and defensive, so whether you're going first or second in a best of one, having cards like this are really good. And again, they're rare. You can play 3 of each. All in all, they're really amazing for whatever deck you're trying to build. And probably my favorite trap in the low rarity slot is definitely Torrential Tribute. This card, it's a board wipe, it's a rare. What is not to love about this card? If you can fit it and you're trying to save your gems, this is definitely an easy card to craft. That way you don't have to dig through hundreds of packs trying to get these cards. Also, Dynamiscus is a rare, so if your deck can support that, that's definitely worth considering. All right, so I know I just hit you with a bunch of information, but at the end of the day, I hope it was all useful. There are so many different decks you could build, and again, whether you're going budget or just balling out and throwing a bunch of cash at the game, there is so many things you can build. I definitely am going to be making a lot more content on this game. It's hard not to. If you guys enjoyed this, look forward to more content coming up on the channel. And not only that, there's a ban list around the corner for the TCG, so you already know I'm going to have a lot of content for that as well. Once again, if you haven't subscribed, please consider it. We would always love you to join the squad. So here's hoping to see you guys next time. Peace.